Did you know that some famous people have vanished without a trace, from a talented musician to a fearless war journalist? Here are 15 celebrities who disappeared, leaving behind only questions and mystery. 1. Richie Edwards. Richie Edwards was not only a talented guitarist, but also the lyricist for the Manic Street Preachers. His lyrics often touched on dark themes like alienation, depression, and existential struggles. Listeners of the Manic Street Preachers in the 1990s could feel the intensity of Edwards' emotions in every line he wrote. However, no one could have predicted that these very feelings would eventually lead to one of the most mysterious disappearances in rock history. On February 1, 1995, Edwards vanished without a trace. He was last seen leaving his London hotel room as the band was set to go on an American tour. But Edwards never showed up. His car was later found near the Severn Bridge, a known spot for suicides, but there was no sign of him. Many have speculated that Edwards took his own life, a theory that became more believable because of his history of mental health struggles and self-harm. Some who knew him personally said he had been in a very dark place in the months leading up to his disappearance. However, many others don't believe this version of the story. They think Edwards could have staged his disappearance, perhaps wanting to leave his old life behind and start fresh somewhere else. After all, his body was never found. There were several supposed sightings of Edwards over the years, but none were confirmed. Some said they saw him in places like Goa, India, but it was impossible to prove if it was really him. His family and friends were left in a painful limbo, not knowing whether to grieve or to hope. Edwards was officially declared dead in absentia in 2008, but for many fans and loved ones, the mystery remains. 2. Jean Spangler. Jean Spangler's disappearance is one of Hollywood's most haunting unsolved mysteries. She was a rising star in the late 1940s, although her roles were mostly small. She had a presence on the screen that hinted at a promising future. But all of that changed on the night of October 7, 1949. Spangler left her home in Los Angeles, telling her sister-in-law that she was going to meet her ex-husband and possibly head to a film shoot afterward. She was never seen again. When her family reported her missing, the police launched a search, but there were very few clues to go on. 2 days after Spangler disappeared, her purse was found in Griffith Park, a vast green area in Los Angeles. The strap was broken, as if it had been torn off during a struggle. What made the case even more puzzling was a note found inside the purse. It was addressed to someone named Kirk. The note read, "Can't wait any longer. Going to see Dr. Scott. It will work best this way while Mother is away." This cryptic message led investigators down a rabbit hole of speculation. Some thought that the Kirk mentioned in the note could have been actor Kirk Douglas, who was a major Hollywood star at the time. But Douglas denied knowing anything about Spangler's disappearance. Then there was the mention of a doctor, which led some to believe that Spangler could have been pregnant and seeking an illegal abortion, a dangerous and taboo subject in the 1940s. The police also looked into her ex-husband, Dexter Benner, with whom Spangler had a contentious relationship, particularly over the custody of their daughter. However, Benner had a solid alibi, and the investigation reached a dead end. Organized crime was another theory that emerged. Spangler had reportedly dated some men with mob connections, and people wondered if she had become entangled in something dangerous. In the years that followed, various rumors surfaced about Spangler possibly fleeing to another country, but no evidence was ever found. 3. Bison Dale. Bison Dale, born Brian William Williams, was a unique figure in the world of sports and Hollywood. He changed his name to honor his Native American and African heritage. As a professional basketball player, Dale achieved great success, even winning an NBA championship with the Chicago Bulls in 1997. But despite his achievements on the court, Dale was always searching for more. He retired from basketball at the height of his career, choosing to pursue a life of adventure. He briefly dabbled in acting and modeling, but ultimately, his love for travel and sailing became his main focus. Dale's life seemed like one of freedom, but it would take a tragic turn when he disappeared while sailing in the South Pacific in 2002. Dale set sail with his girlfriend, Serena Carlin, the boat's captain, Bertrand Saldo, and his brother, Miles Davord. They were on a journey that many would envy, exploring the world's most remote and beautiful locations. But something went terribly wrong in July 2002. Davord returned to the U.S. alone, sailing the boat by himself. He later used his brother's identity to make large purchases, raising suspicion. When authorities started investigating, Davord fled before he could be questioned further. He died of an apparent overdose. The case grew more chilling as it became clear that something terrible had happened on that boat. Many believe that Davord killed his brother, Carlin Ansaldo, during an argument. But because no bodies were ever recovered, there was no definitive proof. 4. Brandon Lawson. Brandon Lawson wasn't a celebrity in the traditional sense, but his disappearance has become well known because of the eerie circumstances and the strange 911 call he made on the night of August 9, 2013. Lawson was a 26-year-old father of 4 from Texas. He had been in a relationship with his longtime girlfriend for over a decade. But that night, something went wrong. After an argument with his girlfriend, Lawson left the house and headed out on a long drive. But he didn't get far. His truck ran out of gas on a desolate road near Bront, Texas. It was what happened next that would make his case one of the most puzzling missing person stories in recent history. Around midnight, Lawson made a frantic 911 call. His voice was shaky and hard to understand, but he told the dispatcher that he was in trouble and that someone was chasing him. Lawson's call was filled with confusion and fear, but before he could give any clear information about where he was, the call dropped. His family tried to reach him multiple times, but all they got were garbled messages. Lawson's truck was later found abandoned by the side of the road, but there was no sign of him. Search parties combed the area, but nothing was found. There were no clues, no tracks, and no sign of a struggle. Some people believe that Lawson was hallucinating due to drugs or exhaustion, but others think that he might have stumbled upon something dangerous, like drug smugglers or criminals in the remote area where he disappeared. The 911 call remains a crucial piece of the puzzle, but it only raises more questions. But what about Tara Grinstead, a beauty queen who vanishes with no struggle, no signs, until a shocking confession emerges years later? 5. Glenn Miller. Glenn Miller was one of the most famous big band leaders of the 1940s. His music had a unique sound, and songs like In the Mood and Moonlight Serenade became the soundtrack of a generation. But Miller was not only an entertainer, he was also a patriot. When World War II broke out, Miller put his music career on hold and joined the U.S. military. He led the Army Air Force Band and traveled to different military bases, boosting the morale of soldiers with his music. In December 1944, Miller was supposed to fly from England to France, where he was scheduled to perform for the troops, but he never made it to his destination. His plane disappeared over the English Channel, and neither Miller nor the aircraft was ever found. The disappearance of Glenn Miller shocked the world. How could a man so famous, flying on a routine military flight, just vanish without a trace? There were several theories about what could have happened. Some believed that the plane had gone down in bad weather. Others thought that it might have been shot down by friendly fire during the chaotic wartime conditions. And there were even rumors that Miller had been on a secret mission for the U.S. government. But there was no evidence to support this. The mystery only deepened as the years went by. Searches for the wreckage turned up nothing. Despite the passage of time, Miller's family, friends, and fans never gave up hope of finding out what really happened to him. 6. Patrick McDermott. Patrick McDermott was a cinematographer known for his work behind the camera, but he became widely recognized after his mysterious disappearance on June 30, 2005. He was dating the famous singer and actress Olivia Newton-John at the time, which added to the media attention. On the day of his disappearance, McDermott went on a fishing trip off the California coast with 22 other people. The trip was on a boat called Freedom. It was supposed to be a normal day, but McDermott was never seen again after that. His vanishing sparked one of the most talked-about missing persons cases in recent history. After he didn't return from the trip, Olivia Newton-John and others became very concerned. They began searching for him, but it took 10 days for anyone to report him missing. This was strange because McDermott's absence wasn't immediately noticed by the other passengers on the boat. This delay caused authorities to lose valuable time in their search efforts. Investigators later discovered that McDermott had left behind his personal belongings, including his wallet, keys, and passport, on the boat. This seemed to show that he didn't plan to vanish. But as time went on, things became less clear. Extensive searches were conducted by the Coast Guard, but no sign of McDermott's body was ever found. It seemed possible he had drowned, but the fact that no remains were recovered left room for other ideas to form. One theory that gained a lot of attention was that McDermott faked his death to escape personal and financial problems. He had declared bankruptcy in 2000 and owed child support payments to his ex-wife. This made some people believe that McDermott could have wanted to start a new life somewhere far away. Rumors began circulating that McDermott had fled to Mexico. These rumors claimed that he was living under a different name and avoiding the spotlight. Over the years, several sightings of McDermott were reported in Mexico, and private investigators hired by tabloid newspapers claimed they had proof of his new life. But despite these claims, no concrete evidence ever surfaced to confirm them. Some believed he was hiding in plain sight, living a simple life in a remote area, but this has never been verified. 7. Connie Converse. Connie Converse was a folk singer and songwriter, and her disappearance in August 1974 has baffled people for decades. She was born Elizabeth Eaton Converse in 1924, and she moved to New York City in the 1950s to pursue a career in music. But unlike many artists who make it big, Connie Converse never achieved the recognition she hoped for during her lifetime. Her songs were haunting and unique, but the music industry at the time was focused on other genres, so she struggled to find success. By the early 1970s, Converse became disheartened by her lack of success. She had spent years writing and performing her music, but she felt that it wasn't going anywhere. This sense of failure weighed heavily on her, and it eventually led her to make a drastic decision. In the summer of 1974, Converse packed up her belongings, wrote letters to her friends and family, and disappeared without a trace. In her letters, Converse expressed her sadness and frustration with life. She told her loved ones that she was going to leave, and that they should not try to find her. It's not clear if she intended to end her life or simply start anew somewhere else. But what is certain is that no one ever heard from her again after she left. Her family and friends were left with nothing but her letters and the mystery of her vanishing. Connie Converse was not a celebrity in the traditional sense when she disappeared, but her music has gained much more recognition in the years since her disappearance. In the decades following her disappearance, people rediscovered her work, and she is now considered a pioneer of singer-songwriter music. Her songs, which were ahead of their time, have touched many listeners who relate to the sense of loneliness and melancholy in her lyrics. Many theories have been proposed about what happened to Converse. Some people believe she took her own life, while others think she may have moved to a new place and lived quietly for the rest of her days. There were no clues left behind to suggest foul play, so it seems likely that her disappearance was a personal decision. But like Patrick McDermott's case, the truth remains elusive. Converse's story is especially tragic because she vanished at a time when she was starting to be appreciated. Had she stayed in the public eye a little longer, she might have seen the recognition she longed for. 8. Tara Grinstead. Tara Grinstead was a former beauty queen and aspiring actress who disappeared on October 22, 2005, in one of the most baffling cases of the early 2000s. Born in Hawkinsville, Georgia, on November 14, 1974, she grew up with a passion for pageantry and teaching. Tara entered beauty pageants as a teenager and went on to win several titles, including Miss Tifton in 1999. She was known for her bright smile, her ambition, and her love for her students, as she was a high school history teacher at the time of her disappearance. On the day she vanished, Tara had attended a beauty pageant and then went to a barbecue at a friend's house. After leaving the barbecue, she returned home. The next day, she didn't show up for work, and her coworkers became concerned. Friends and family tried calling her, but there was no response. When they went to her house, they found her car parked in the driveway, and her purse and keys were inside, but there was no sign of Tara. Investigators quickly became involved, but there were no immediate clues to explain what had happened to her. There were no signs of forced entry or a struggle, and nothing seemed to be missing from her home. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, the search for Tara Grinstead grew more desperate. Friends, family, and community members organized searches, but nothing was found. Her case soon became one of the largest missing persons investigations in Georgia's history. For years, Tara's disappearance remained a mystery. People speculated about what could have happened. Some thought she had been abducted by a stranger, while others believed someone close to her might have been involved. One of the most popular theories was that Tara had met with foul play at the hands of someone she knew, but there was no solid evidence to prove it. The case grew cold, and investigators seemed to hit dead end after dead end. Tara's family held out hope for her return, but as time passed, that hope began to fade. In the years after her disappearance, various people came forward with tips, but none led to a breakthrough. The case became the subject of true crime shows and podcasts, as many people became fascinated by the mystery of what had happened to Tara Grinstead. The case had all the elements of a real-life mystery: a young and beautiful woman, a quiet southern town, and no clear answers. It wasn't until 2017, more than a decade after Tara went missing, that the case saw a major development. New evidence came to light, leading to the arrest of two men, Ryan Duke and Bo Dukes. According to authorities, Ryan Duke had confessed to killing Tara. He claimed he had broken into her home to rob her, but things had gone wrong, and he had accidentally killed her. Bo Dukes was accused of helping Ryan dispose of Tara's body by burning it in a rural area. Now, if you are enjoying this video so far, then make sure to give this video a like and also smash that subscribe button while you're down there. 9. Bobby Fuller. Bobby Fuller's life ended under equally mysterious circumstances, but his disappearance and death took place decades earlier, on July 18, 1966. Bobby Fuller was the lead singer and guitarist of the Bobby Fuller Four, a rock band best known for their hit single, I Fought the Law. Born on October 22, 1942, in Baytown, Texas, Bobby grew up with a love for music. He was inspired by the sounds of Buddy Holly and other rock and roll pioneers, and by the time he was a teenager, he was performing in local bands. Bobby moved to Los Angeles in the early 1960s, where he formed the Bobby Fuller Four with his brother Randy and two other musicians. The band quickly gained popularity, especially after the release of I Fought the Law in 1966. Bobby's success seemed to be on the rise, but it all came to a sudden and tragic end that summer. On the day of his death, Bobby Fuller was found in his car outside his apartment in Los Angeles. He had been missing for several hours before his body was discovered. At first glance, it appeared that Bobby had died from inhaling gasoline fumes, and his death was officially ruled as accidental asphyxiation. But almost immediately, people began to suspect that something more sinister had happened. For one thing, the circumstances surrounding Bobby's death were unusual. His body was found in the front seat of his car, and his face and chest were covered in bruises. There were also signs that gasoline had been poured over him. These details made it seem unlikely that his death was an accident, but the police were quick to close the case without further investigation. Many of Bobby's friends and family believed he had been murdered. One theory was that his death was related to organized crime figures tied to the music industry. It was rumored that Bobby had gotten involved with powerful people who didn't want him to succeed on his own terms. Others speculated that Bobby had been caught up in a personal conflict that led to his murder, but no evidence was ever found to support these theories. Bobby's death remains officially classified as an accident. 10. Dorothy Arnold. Dorothy Arnold's disappearance on December 12, 1910, remains one of the most puzzling cases in American history. Born into a wealthy and influential family, Dorothy was a well-known socialite in New York City. She was the daughter of Francis Arnold, a successful perfume importer, and her family had deep roots in American high society. Despite her privileged background, Dorothy had ambitions beyond her social circle. She aspired to become a writer, though she struggled to gain recognition. By the time she disappeared, she had already faced several rejections from publishers, which reportedly affected her mood. On the day of her disappearance, Dorothy left her family's home on the Upper East Side and went shopping in the city. She was seen by several acquaintances as she went about her errands, including shopping for chocolates and purchasing a book. Dorothy appeared to be in good spirits, and there was nothing to suggest that she was planning to leave or harm herself. After leaving a bookstore, she walked down Fifth Avenue, and then she vanished without a trace. When Dorothy didn't return home that evening, her family grew concerned. At first, they tried to handle the situation quietly, thinking that she might have gone to visit friends or taken a short trip. But as hours turned into days, they realized that something was very wrong. They contacted private detectives to search for Dorothy, but despite an extensive investigation, no solid leads were found. The Arnold family initially kept the police out of the investigation, preferring to avoid a public scandal, but eventually, they had no choice but to involve law enforcement. As the search for Dorothy intensified, numerous theories emerged. Some people believed that Dorothy had committed suicide, perhaps due to her failed literary career. Others speculated that she had been the victim of foul play. One theory suggested that Dorothy had become pregnant out of wedlock and had been murdered to cover up the scandal. There were also rumors that Dorothy had run away to start a new life, possibly in Europe. The police conducted exhaustive searches, interviewing hundreds of people and following every lead. But none of the theories could be proven. Dorothy's family remained hopeful that she would be found. But over time, their hopes faded. The case grew cold, and Dorothy Arnold became another name in the long list of unsolved disappearances. 11. Judge Joseph Force Crater. Judge Joseph Force Crater's disappearance on August 6, 1930, became one of the most notorious missing persons cases of the 20th century. Born in Easton, Pennsylvania, in 1889, Crater was a successful lawyer who had been appointed as a New York Supreme Court judge just months before he vanished. He had a reputation as a sharp legal mind, but he was also known for his connections to political power brokers and the world of New York's nightlife. Crater's sudden disappearance shocked the city and earned him the nickname, the missingest man in New York. On the day he disappeared, Crater had lunch with a fellow judge and later met his mistress, showgirl Sally Lou Ritz. That evening, he had dinner with two friends at a popular restaurant on West 45th Street. After dinner, Crater reportedly hailed a cab and told his friends that he was heading to a Broadway show. That was the last time anyone saw him. When Crater failed to return home, his wife, Stella, grew concerned, but at first, she didn't report him missing, thinking that he might be caught up in work or staying with friends. It wasn't until weeks later that she contacted the police. Crater's disappearance quickly became front-page news. The media was fascinated by the case, as it involved a prominent judge who had connections to New York's political elite. Rumors swirled about what might have happened to him. Some people believed that Crater had been murdered, possibly because he knew too much about corruption in the city's government. Others speculated that he had run away to avoid scandal, as there were whispers of his involvement in shady dealings. One of the most persistent theories was that Crater had been killed because of his ties to organized crime. At the time of his disappearance, New York was a hotbed of corruption, and Crater was known to have connections to several powerful figures. Some believed that he had been silenced to prevent him from exposing criminal activities. There were also suggestions that Crater had staged his own disappearance to escape financial troubles, though this theory was less widely accepted. The police launched an extensive investigation, but they were unable to find any solid leads. Crater's bank account remained untouched, and there was no sign that he had fled the country. His wife offered a reward for information, but nothing substantial came forward. In the years following his disappearance, several people claimed to have seen Crater in various locations, including Canada and the Caribbean, but none of these sightings were confirmed. 12. Theodosia Burr Alston. Theodosia Burr Alston, born in 1783, was the daughter of one of the most controversial figures in American history. Aaron Burr was the third Vice President of the United States, but he is perhaps best known for killing Alexander Hamilton in a duel. Despite her father's tarnished reputation, Theodosia grew up in privilege and was highly educated for a woman of her time. She married Joseph Alston, a wealthy planter from South Carolina, and became the First Lady of South Carolina when her husband was elected governor. Theodosia was a beloved figure in society, known for her intelligence, beauty, and charm, but her life was not without tragedy. She suffered the loss of her son, Aaron Burr Alston, who died of malaria in 1812. His death devastated Theodosia, and she fell into a deep depression. In an effort to lift her spirits, her father arranged for her to travel from South Carolina to New York to visit him. The journey was meant to be a time of healing for Theodosia, but it ended in tragedy when she disappeared during the voyage. Theodosia set sail on the schooner Patriot from Georgetown, South Carolina, on December 31, 1812. The ship was bound for New York, but it never arrived. The Patriot and everyone on board, including Theodosia, vanished without a trace. The disappearance of the ship led to widespread speculation about what might have happened. Some people believed that the ship had been caught in a storm and sunk, while others thought it had been attacked by pirates. 13. Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa, one of the most powerful and controversial labor leaders in American history, disappeared on July 30, 1975. He was the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, the largest and most influential labor union in the United States at the time. Hoffa had a complicated relationship with both the U.S. government and organized crime. His rise to power came with allegations of corruption, and he was known to have connections to the mafia. Hoffa's life was a mix of ambition, political maneuvering, and criminal activity, making his disappearance one of the most mysterious cases of the 20th century. On the day of his disappearance, Hoffa was supposed to meet with two mafia members, Anthony Tony Jack Giacalone and Anthony Tony Pro Provenzano, at the Machus Red Fox restaurant in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. Hoffa had hoped to discuss his plans to regain control of the Teamsters after serving time in prison. He had been released from prison a few years earlier after serving time for jury tampering and fraud. And although he was officially banned from union activities, Hoffa was determined to return to his position of power. Hoffa arrived at the restaurant around 2 p.m. and waited for Giacalone and Provenzano, but they never showed up. According to witnesses, Hoffa made a phone call from a nearby payphone, expressing his frustration about the no-show. That was the last time anyone saw him. His car was found unlocked in the restaurant parking lot, but there was no sign of him. The investigation into Hoffa's disappearance began immediately, but it quickly became apparent that solving the case would be difficult. The FBI launched one of the largest investigations in its history, interviewing hundreds of people and following countless leads. But despite their efforts, no solid evidence was ever found. Hoffa's connections to organized crime led to numerous theories about what might have happened to him. Some believe that he was killed by the mafia to prevent him from regaining control of the Teamsters, while others thought that he was killed because he knew too much about criminal activities within the union. Over the years, various theories and confessions have emerged about Hoffa's fate, but none have been proven. Some people claimed that Hoffa was buried in concrete at the site of a former stadium, while others suggested that his body was incinerated or dumped in the ocean. The FBI even conducted several excavations based on tips and leads, but no remains were ever found. Hoffa's disappearance has since become one of the most enduring mysteries in American history. In 1982, Jimmy Hoffa was declared legally dead, though his body was never found. His disappearance has been the subject of numerous books, documentaries, and films, including the 2019 movie The Irishman, which explores one of the many theories about his death. 14. Adrienne Shelly. Adrienne Shelly, born Adrienne Levine, was a talented actress and filmmaker known for her work in independent films. One of her most notable roles was in the 1989 film The Unbelievable Truth, directed by Hal Hartley. Shelley's talent and unique presence on screen made her a favorite in the indie film scene, and she continued to act throughout the 1990s and early 2000s. But Shelley was not content with just acting. She had aspirations to write and direct her own films. By 2006, Shelley had transitioned into a successful writer and director, and her most notable work came with the film Waitress. The movie, which she wrote, directed, and co-starred in, was a heartfelt story about a pregnant woman trapped in an abusive marriage, looking for a way to start over. Waitress premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2007 and was critically acclaimed, but tragically, Shelley never lived to see the success of her film. On November 1, 2006, Shelley was found hanging in the bathroom of her apartment by her husband. The initial assumption was that she had committed suicide, but her husband refused to believe that Shelley would take her own life. He pressed authorities to investigate further, and soon they uncovered the truth. Shelley had been murdered by a construction worker named Diego Pilco, who had been working in the building. Pilco later confessed to the crime, stating that he had entered Shelley's apartment to confront her after she complained about the noise from his construction work. According to his confession, the confrontation escalated, and Pilco struck Shelley, knocking her unconscious. Panicked, he staged the scene to make it look like a suicide. 15. Sean Flynn. Sean Flynn, the son of legendary actor Errol Flynn, disappeared on April 6, 1970, while working as a photojournalist during the Vietnam War. Unlike his father, who was known for his swashbuckling roles in Hollywood films, Sean Flynn chose a different path. He was drawn to adventure, but his interests lay in documenting the realities of war rather than acting on the silver screen. Flynn's disappearance in Cambodia during the Vietnam War has remained a mystery for over 5 decades. Born in 1941, Sean Flynn grew up in the shadow of his famous father. But he was determined to forge his own path. He briefly followed in his father's footsteps, appearing in a few films during the 1960s. But his true passion was photography. Flynn became a war correspondent, covering conflicts in Africa and the Middle East before heading to Vietnam. By the time he arrived in Southeast Asia, Flynn had already earned a reputation as a fearless journalist, willing to go to great lengths to capture the perfect shot. On April 6, 1970, Flynn and a fellow journalist, Dana Stone, were traveling on motorcycles in Cambodia when they were captured by communist forces, likely the Viet Cong or the Khmer Rouge. The two men were never seen again. Their disappearance sent shockwaves through the journalism community, as Flynn and Stone were well known and respected for their work. Despite numerous searches and investigations over the years, no trace of Flynn or Stone was ever found.